If all of you are doing well, we're learning Maseches Yevamos, Daf Kuf Chaf Aleph. I didn't ask you. It says the Gemara opening with a new Mishnah, 12 lines down, Kuf Chaf Aleph from an Aleph. This is actually the famed Gemara that Rabbi Meir Shapiro referred to the Daf Shel Sfina, that he says if you hold on to the board, if you hold on to the Daf, then you'll be able to navigate the complex waters of life. But let's get there first. The Mishnah opens, Nafal Amayim, if a man falls into the water, bein sheyesh lahem sof, bein she'ein lahem sof, whether or not we're able to see the end of the water, in other words, if the water is bordered or not bordered, either way, ishto asura, we cannot necessarily assume he died. Maybe he lived throughout this ordeal and she cannot remarry. Amar Reb Meir, there was this one case scenario where a man fell into a large bore, and we see therefore this idea that ishto asura, that his wife should not remarry, makes sense because this man managed to live within the water somehow for 3 days. We'll discuss this in the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yossi, I disagree. There was a man who was blind. He went down to a pit inside of a cave to go to the mikvah. The Yared Moshchol Acharav, the person, the Moshel, who was kind of holding his arm. If you've ever seen people who are blind, they have someone guiding them sometimes. So this was his guide. The Shahu Kadesha Tete Nafshim, he went underwater, couldn't find it. He was there for long enough that a person was not able to live that long. And then what was the din? V'hisiu Nesho Sam, that they allowed his wives to remarry. So what do we see? We see over here different than the Reisha. In the beginning of the mission of the Tanna Kama held Ishto Asura. Yet here we see that it's mutter. And another story to match this is V'shuv Maisa Ba'asya Be'echad we saw this already, that a man was lowered into the water. And all they found afterwards was his leg. And Amru Chachamim, it depends. If the leg that you found, if the cut that you found was knee and up, if the knee was not there, if the cut was above the knee, then we assume he will not live through that. Tina say she can therefore marry. But if the cut was below the knee, it was in the calf area, then we assume that they can get married. This comes up in, like, God forbid, shark bite scenarios. There was a shark attack and you only find the leg. It's lamaisa. If you only find the calf, then we assume the person's still alive. If you find a cut above the knee, the bite mark is above the knee, and that's what you see, then maybe the person should be considered to be dead. Tana Rabbanan, the Brisa matches what we have in our Mishnah, a little bit of different phraseology, but similar ideas. And says the Gemara as follows: Tana Rabbanan, Nafa lemayim, if a person falls into the water, bein sheyesh lahem sof, bein she'ein lahem sof, ishto asura divrei Reb Meir. This is Reb Meir, like we saw in our Mishnah, that it is forbidden for a woman to remarry if a man falls into water, whether or not there is. We have sheets if you need a sheet. Today's Daf. Whether or not there are borders to the water, we assume that she is not allowed to remarry. The Chachamim argue, the Chachamim omer, third of the way down, Ma'im sheyesh lem, so ishta muteres. If you can see the boundaries of the water, then fine, they can remarry. The she'ein lem so, but if there are no boundaries of water, it's an ocean or it's a running river, then ishto asura, then they cannot remarry. Hechi dami ma'im sheyesh lem so. What are the parameters of a body of water that has a sof to it, that has an end? So the Gemara says, Amar Abaye, Kol she'omid v'roa me'arba ruchosa. You have to be able to see the entire boundaries of the entire ocean. So let's say you're in a circular lake and you can see the boundaries of the lake. That's called sheyesh lahem sof. And the Gemara tells a whole number of stories from here till really just for a while. There's a man who drowned in a marshland in a place called Samke. And in Siba Rav Shila l'debisu, and Rav Shila allowed his wife to get married. This man who drowned, Rav, the famed Amora, Rav was very upset about this. Amar le Rav l'Shmuel. Now let's remember that Rav and Shmuel argued all the time. But here, Rav and Shmuel were on the same coin. Rav says to Shmuel, Ta nishamte. We need to put this guy into chayr. He did something wrong. She's not allowed to get married. Amar le, Shmuel calms him down and says, Rav, patience. Nishlach le beresha. First, let's send the guy a letter and see what he says. Shalchu le, so they sent him a letter. They sent a letter to the Rav Shila, who passed in this way. And the Gemara says, Shalchu le as follows. Ma'im she'ein lem sof ishto asura umuteres. If you have water that has no boundaries, you cannot see shore all the way around. Is she allowed to marry or is she not allowed to marry? So says the Gemara, Shalach lahu ishto asura, not allowed to get married. Okay, well that's step one to the argument. Step two, the agma de samke, ma'im sheyesh lem sof or ma'im she'ein lem sof. What kind of water is this agma de samke? Says the Gemara, halfway down kuf chaf aleph from an aleph, Shalach lahu ma'im she'ein lem sofu. That's a water that has no end. So then says the Gemara, the slam dunk question. Umar, my time of arachi. Why did you paskin the way that you paskin. You should not have allowed her to remarry. Says the Gemara, you're right. Mita ta'ina, I made a mistake. Ona sabri came in the kabu b'kaime. Since all the waters were relatively still in this space, kemayim sheyesh lahem softami. I thought it was similar to a space that actually was boundaried. Velohi, it's not true. Kevan the ikagale, since there is some movement in the water, some waves. Amor gali ishbalu. I might therefore assume that the waves will carry them apart. Let's just say kedusha, and we'll come right back. Mara says about the story between Rab and Shmuel. Kari Shmuel alei de Rab. Shmuel says about Rab, hey, you need to realize you're a big tzaddik. Lo ye'une letzaddik kol oven. Obviously, you're a big tzaddik because we couldn't even have a scenario where you would by accident put this guy into Shanta because you were saved, because Shmuel saved him. Shmuel was saying to Rav, you're amazing, Hashem loves you. So Rav says back to him, Kari le Rav alei de Shmuel, ushua berov yoetz. Where does my salvation come from? From someone who's berov yoetz, who gives a lot of eitzah. So Rav and Shmuel, they argue throughout Shas. They were best friends, they loved each other. They were so warm about one another. It's a great story. The Gemara continues. Tanya, the Brisa writes, Amar Rebbe, Maise b'shnei b'nei adam mechamrin machmorim b'yarden. Two people in the Jordan River, they were casting nets to catch fish. You've been in the Jordan, it flows. So it says the Gemara, v'nichnas echad mehem l'mechila shel dagim. In the side bed of one of the walls of the river, there was a cutout where fish would hang out. So this guy walks into the cutout, and they were still able to breathe. So he was able to stand up and breathe. The shakacham, it got dark. The lo ra'a pischa shamlechil, he didn't know how to get out. He was trapped in this very deep entrance into the side bed of the Jordan River. The shachaver k'dish tetzei nafsho. His friend waited and said, I guess he died. Unfortunate story. He went back to the family and said, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. He died. Says the Gemara, in the morning the sun came up, and then the guy who was stuck in the mechila, in this cutout in the side bed, he walks into his own funeral. Everybody's sitting shiva. He walks in the door. The guy shows up. He's like, I'm fine. Amar Rebbe, Kama Gdolim Divrei Chachamim She'amru Mayim Sheish Lahem Sof Ishto Muteres and She'ein Lahem Sof Ishto Asura. Now, this wasn't the reason why the Chachamim said what they said, but it was certainly the case that because the Yarden is Mayim Ein Lahem Sof, and the din by Mayim of Ein Lahem Sof is when a man disappears, she cannot remarry. Brilliant that they said that, because this guy happened to survive, and it was Mayim She'ein Lahem Sof. He happened to have survived in a cutout in the water. Says the Gemara, well, why can't that cutout exist in Mayim Sheyesh Lahem Sof? Why can't you have a cutout in a circular lake? Ihachi, says the Gemara, 2/3 of the way down. Mayim Sheyesh Lahem Sof nami leichush lemechila shel dagim. Maybe we should have a concern there also that he can still be alive. How then could the Chachamim say that if it's Yesh Lahem Sof, that if I can see the boundaries, that she's allowed to remarry? Maybe he can survive in this mechila shel dagim. Says the Gemara, because the fish don't do that. The Mayim Sheyesh Lahem Sof mechila shel dagim lo shchicha. When the water is Yesh Lahem Sof, then that's not common for fish to do that. They only do this because of all of the flowing water. Next, Amar Rav Ashi, Hada Amru Rabbanan, the rabbis say the following, the line that the rabbis say, Mayim She'ein Lahem Sof Ishto Asura, Hanimili Be'inish Ta'alma. That applies to the average Joe. It doesn't apply to everyone. It applies to the average Joe, but not to everyone. Who's left out? Aval Tzurba Me Rabbanan Lo. For a Rav, it's not true. For a Rav, we can change the din because Idasalik Kala Isle. If he comes onto shore anywhere, people are going to know him. We just stood up 10 times at a chuppah. When the dayan is called, everybody knows who they are. So a chashav Rav is the person who Rahman al-Islam drowns. If he comes out of water, everyone's going to rally around him. So therefore, there's a koll, and therefore we can fairly assume that he either came out of the water or didn't, and therefore she can remarry. It says the Gemara, Velohi, we do not paskin that way. We don't make a distinction between a Rav and the average Joe. Loshna inish ta'alma, veloshna tzorba merabbanat. The avad in the chatchila, although the din still applies, it's a din b'di'eved that one is not allowed to marry, but the chatchila, one is not supposed to marry under these circumstances. Another brayso, Tanya, Abraham Gamliel, Hamachas hayisi mahalach besvina v'risi svina achas shenishbara. This guy was on one boat. He looks and sees that another boat has fallen apart. And there was a big Rav who lived on that boat. Who is that big Rav? Manu? Rabbi Akiva. So you saw Rabbi Akiva's boat was crashing and starting to sink. And when Rabbi Gamliel got to dry land, Rabbi Akiva shows up out of the blue. Rabbi Akiva's ship that was shipwrecked, how did he survive? Amarti lo bini, mihe halacha, how did you get out of the water? So Amar lo, daf shel sfina nizdamenli. There was a board that saved me from the water. Any wave of water that came to hit me, I put my head down and then I was able to survive. If a Rasha comes, you should shake your head in a particular way, lower your head, put your head down, keep your head down, stay focused, and get it done. Of course, the famed mashal here that Reb Meir Shapira highlighted is that the waters are the dangerous parts of life, and the daf is the security blanket. Hold on tight. That's what we need to be doing. That's what the daf is. And says the Gemara, Amarti as well, Ba'osa Shah, Kama Gedon Divrei Chachamim Shamru Ma'im Sheish Lam Sof Muteres, Ma'im She'ein Lam Sof, which is where Rabbi Akiva's ship was all wrecked. What did we say? Asuri cannot remarry. V'haraya, Rabbi Akiva showed up on the ground again, and it was an ocean. He was able to survive. And as well, a very similar story, this time with Rabbi Akiva being the watcher, the bystander. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Akiva, I saw that there was a particular boat that was trembling in the waters. It was a disastrous boat, or a terrible storm. And I was very emotional about the person who lived on that boat. I was afraid that person would be killed. Umanu, that's Reb Meir. So Rabbi Akiva was now watching Reb Meir. 6 lines from the bottom. When I got onto the ground, I was in the city of Kaputkia. I was learning in the base medrash. This is again Rabbi Akiva talking. Baba Yashav had done the fun. All of a sudden, Reb Meir walks in. He says, "Unbelievable! How did you survive?" Amarti lo bani who got you? Who saved you? So says the Gemara, Amarli gal taradni lechaveru lechaveru ad shehikiani liyabasha. One wave took care of me. He threw me in the next friend wave and into the next wave and into the next wave until I was hikiani, which in modern Hebrew means to vomit or throw up. I was thrown onto the ground, and that's how I survived. What is the lashon? I don't know what it is. No, I know what Yonah is.
Yeah. I'm saying the fish was hiki. Yes,
oh, hiki. I thought you were talking about the God language. Yeah.
No.
So that's what the Gemara says. He was quote unquote thrown back onto the ground biyabasha. Says the Gemara, Amarti ba'osasha kam gdol divrei chachamim shamru ma'im sheish lam sof ishto moteres ma'im sheish ein lam sof ishto asura. Again, another raya. We have a similar shita like this from the Gra. The Gra used to say about ma'im megulim. Oh, you shouldn't drink the water that's left out all night because maybe a snake put its venom inside the water. And the Gemara says that's the din. So some of the Mefarshim say, fine, but what if there's no snakes? We don't have snakes, Baruch Hashem, in residential neighborhoods. By and large, we don't have that. Says the Gemara, it doesn't matter. There are, for the one reason you see on the surface, the Chachamim had 100 other reasons that you don't know about. And obviously that was playing out here as well. Even though logic wouldn't necessarily dictate every conclusion, but the Chachamim had a deeper wisdom. And here we see that it played out, that what it was, Ma'im She'ein Lam Sof, Ishto Asura, that she is not allowed to remarry. We assume there's still a chance that he can survive. 3 lines from the bottom. What about other similarly precarious scenarios? Tanu Rabbana Nafal Legova Rayos. A person falls into a den of lions. Ein me'idin alav. We cannot testify that he is necessarily dead. Maybe he'll survive. What about lechafir malei nechashim ba'akravim? He falls into a pit that's filled with snakes and scorpions. Says the Gemara, me'idin alav. He's a dead man. You can even testify, even though he's not dead yet. You can testify that maybe he will be dead.
There's this like famous story.
You'll see in the top. Hold on. We're not going to talk about him, but the Gemara. There's a famous story. Yeah. It's in Yonah. It's in the Sefer Yonah. Rabbi Yehuda
a rough day.
No, even if you go inside that space where there's Nechashim and Akravim, we still don't assume he's dead. Why? As we turn to the top of Kuf Chaf Aleph, Amud Beis, Shema Chaverhu, maybe he's a Chaver. Rashi, Dibra Maskal Shema Chaverhu, Yodeh Lil Chosh. He's a charmer. He's a snake charmer. He knows how to keep them calm. Oh, so maybe we can say, therefore, he's not necessarily a dead man. Oh, what about the Tanakama who says that he's necessarily a dead man? Because the Gemara says, Agav itzitza, yeah, you could be a snake charmer all you want. When you step on a scorpion, he's going to bite you. And itzitza means that you've crushed him. And therefore, what's the din? Agav itzitza mazkile, therefore you're going to get bitten and killed. That's why the Tanakama holds that if this person gets put into a pit of snakes and scorpions, halachically he's dead, even without even watching the end. You could walk away and tell his wife to go remarry. That was argued by the dissenting Shita of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Next, Tanu Rabbanan, Nafal Lasoch Kivshana Eish, you are put into a fire. What's the din? Me'idin alav. You're a dead man. We can testify to your wife that you are dead. Layora to a pot that's malaya yain b'shemen. Let's say that a person's put into a pot that's on top of a fire, filled with oil and filled with wine. Me'idin alav. You're dead. Says the Gemara, not necessarily. Yes. When a person gets into a pot of oil and with water displacement, some of the oil spills over, This was a question that I had in chemistry with Dr. Karesh in 11th grade. How do you tell the exact volume of an item? And the answer was drop it in a bucket of water slowly and see how much water drips out. Water displacement. So this guy jumps in, all of the oil spills out. What happens when oil reaches the bottom with the fire? The fire increases and you kill yourself faster because you just increase the fire with oil. However, shal yayin, but wine is not like that. Wine is not flammable. Well, maybe it is, but maybe not their wine. Says the Gemara, but if you get into a full pot of wine and then the water displacement presses out and removes all of the wine, that will put out the fire. They said back to him, in the beginning it will lower the fire. However, once we burn off the grapes and the alcohol is then reached, the sofo mavir, in the end of the day, it's going to create for a much bigger fire.
And we're assuming during all this time he can't pull himself out.
That's the assumption.
It's a while.
Or it could be boiling already. It's also possible. Amar Reb Meir. Reb Meir says, we had said a case in our Mishnah where a person lasted 3 days in a bor gadol. And the Gemara says, Tanya, Amru lo Reb Meir, the Chachamim said to Reb Meir, Ein maskir and ma'aseh. This is ridiculous. The guy lived for 3 days in water. That's not normal. That's not normal. You can't talk about miracles. My ma'aseh. What did they say the miracle was? That he didn't eat for 3 days or drink for 3 days. We have a raya brura from Esther. We know that by Esther we didn't eat for 3 days. That's not a nace. That happens. No big deal. Says the Gemara, maybe that he didn't sleep for 3 days. The Amar of Yochanan, we know that a person cannot sleep for 3 days because if a person makes a shvua shelo isha shlosha yamim, he gets malkos because he's a liar. He said a shvua that was wrong. You can't not sleep for 3 days. Malkin also, he gets malkos, but yashan l'altar, he can sleep right away. Your shvua that you're not sleeping, it does. That's a zero. It's a zero. So maybe that's the miracle that he stayed awake for 3 days. Says the Gemara, no. Rabbi Meir, my timer. Amar Kahana, keepin al gav keepin hayu. There was in this water where he was these types of structures where he could rest and take a nap, and he was able to sleep. So there was nothing miraculous about this case. Therefore, it should be presented in our Mishnah. The rabbis say, yeah, there were structures in there, but they were made out of marble. Wet marble is very slippery, and you cannot fall asleep standing up against it, Rashi highlights, and therefore this case is still miraculous. For Reb Meir says, people figure it out. It's impossible that he didn't find a place to lean and catch a quick nap. Third of the way down, 4 lines before the middle width lines. The daughter of Nechunya, who was a digger of wells, Shenafla Labor, she fell into a pit, Labor Hagadol, Ubo vehodil Reb Chanina ben Dosa. She fell into the well, and they went to go tell Reb Chanina ben Dosa. Shah Rishona Amar Lem Shalom. He said she's doing fine in the first hour. Shnia Amar Lem Shalom. They said in the second hour she's still doing fine. Shlishis, first of the middle width lines. Amar Lehem Alsa. She's out. She's out. Everything is well. Amar La, they said to her, Biti, Mihaelcha, who took you out of the well? You should have been considered dead at that point. How did you get out of the well? Amar Lo, Zachar Shal Rachelim, Nizdamani V'Zakan Manhigo. I saw a male Rachel, I saw a male ram, and an old man who was Abraham. The Gemara doesn't say it, it's referring to Abraham, who was guiding it. So Amar Lo, they said, Nabi Ata, how did you know what was going on here? Amar Lem, no, Lo Navi Anochi, Lo Ben Navi Anochi. Ela Davar Hatzadik Misasek Bo, Vikashel Bozaro. No, I was digging wells. She was in a well. We're not going to let it be that she's going to die in a well. Pastish, it's not right because Avram Avinu dug wells. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Abba, Afal Pikain, Meis Benobet Sama. There still was an onesh that was given to this family because he's being judged Kechut HaSe'ara. What he did wrong is not clear from here, but Meis Benobet Sama, that his son died because of thirst. Amar, how are tzaddikim judged? The Svivav Nis'ara Me'od. Those who are around him are judged Kechut HaSa'ar, from the word Nis'ara. Melamit HaKadosh Baruch Hu Medaktik in Svivav Kechut HaSa'ara. Those who are in the closest relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu are judged Kechut HaSe'ara. So in fact, the sign of a very close relationship is that you get called out for the small things. If you're not in a close relationship, no one's going to call you out on the small things. But if someone really cares about you, they're going to call you out on the small things. Reb Chanina Omer Mihacha, we know that there's a din of being medaktik Kechut HaSe'ara from here. Kel naratz besod kedushim rabba v'no ra al kol svivav. He will be no ra. He will instill fear on those who are around him. Next Mishnah, we're going to go until about 3 lines from the bottom of the page. The new Mishnah opens a little bit more than halfway down. Even if we just hear women talking, they're chattering, and they said, guess who died? That is sufficient for a woman to remarry. Even if the kids are talking in the park and they say, oh, did you hear what happened? This person died. We're going to go to his funeral. And bein shu miskaben ubein she'enu miskaben, whether or not his intention was to clearly tell you that someone was dying. We'll discuss that line in the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava Omer b'Yisrael afal pi shu miskaben. When it comes to a Jew, even if his intention was to cause for remarriage or possibly another din, we'll see in the Gemara, then we believe him. If it's a guy, if his intention was to create edus that she could remarry, under those circumstances, we do not accept testimony. We only accept the edus of a guy if his intention was to share information without forcing a remarriage. Let's get into the Gemara. We had said in the Mishnah that we trust children to say that somebody died. The Dilmalo Azle, they said in the Mishnah they were going to go. Hare anu holchim, we're going to go to. Maybe they never went, and maybe we really don't know if the person died. Says the Gemara, that's not correct. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Deka Amre, Harinhu Ba'in Milispod. We're coming from the Hesped in Milikbor Es Ish Ploni because they buried this person. Says the Gemara, the Dilma Kamsa Ba'al Mashachivle. Maybe it was actually just a grasshopper, and they gave the grasshopper a name, Vesikule Shmei. Oh, but they named the grasshopper Henry. Henry died. Oh, we went to Henry's funeral just now. They're kids. They're talking cute, right? Maybe it wasn't a person at all. Says the Gemara, you're right. Without the details, we wouldn't have known. But they laid down more details. The Ka'amre, Kain v'chein Rabbanan havu hasam. These are the rabbis who spoke. Kain v'chein Sabdani havu hasam. These are the people who gave the eulogies. That's how we know that a child is actually correct. But stam, if a child says, guess who died, we do not believe him. Only if they went to the place where the hesped was and they spoke about who was there. Next, we had said that if the Obe Kochavim was trying to get the woman remarried, we do not trust him. Rabbi Yehuda bar Shmuel, when is that true? The only way we don't believe him is when he's trying to get her to remarry again. If he's trying to just give testimony stam that the person died, not that his wife should get remarried, but stam, edus, we do trust him. How do we know what type of edus the guy is giving? Rav Yosef, Bala Bezdin, v'amar ish ploni meis, hesius ishto. Let's say he says, the guy says, so-and-so died, let his wife remarry. When he opens his mouth about the wife remarrying, zeunis kavin lahatir, where we don't trust him. He's not allowed to give edus like that. But meistam, if he goes to Bezdin and said, so-and-so died, then zen is kavein le'edus, and that's fine. We do trust him. Itmar nami in the Amoraim we have a similar conversation. The only time we don't listen to a guy is when he's trying to give a heter for the wife to marry. But if he's just trying to say that a person died, then we do trust him. Wasn't this the exact thing that happened with Oshai Baribi? This word should be shehisris, from the word of a shield, a tris, that he was fighting with the Chachamim, one against all the Chachamim. Oshai Baribi was trying to teach something. Amar lahem, he said to them, I don't agree with you. He said to them, Lo shanu el shenis kaven lahatir. We don't trust a guy when he's trying to be matir, to try to be matir the woman to marry. Avan is kaven lahayde do so edus. And all the Chachamim pushed back on him and said, no, v'lohodu lo Chachamim. They didn't agree with him. Ella midikatani masnisen dikatani When do we trust a guy? Only when that which he's saying is being said in a casual form. Oh, wow, it's so sad that so-and-so died. Something that he shared with. Then we trust him. But when he's going to Bezdin to give edus, a guy doesn't have edus. He's a guy. He doesn't have any edus at all. Only when he's speaking casually, without any reason for there to be an ulterior motive of his speech, do we trust him. As this is brought out in the following example. Does anyone know about the house of Chivoy? Does anyone know where he lives? He died. This person was speaking on his own. He was just sad. He was just talking. Then we trust him. The incident of Yosef allowed his wife to get married based off of that passing testimony, the Maseches testimony of a guy. The person, the horse rider who was very quick and who lived in Pumbedisa, he died. And based on that, Rav Yosef, they allowed the woman to get married. Either Rav Yosef allowed it or Rava, because the guy gave testimony in a safe and passing way. He just said it. One more story, 8 lines from the bottom, maybe a couple more stories. Does anyone know where Bechasa lives? This person, Chasa, he died. Oh my gosh. There are fish who are eating the body of Chasa. It says the Gemara, Rav Nachman, based on the testimony of Rav Nachman, where he said that the body was being eaten by fish, and then she was able to get remarried because the Rav Nachman said that she was being that his body was being eaten by fish. Nobody said anything back to him. Omar Rav Ashi, what do we see about this story that Chasa was in the water? We don't. It's a din lechatchila. but it's a din b'di'evet, but not a din l'chatchila. If they got married, then it would be acceptable, but they really shouldn't get married l'chatchila. And Ika Da'amre, first of the long line, some say the story was a little different. In Siba Rav Nachman the Debisu, he married her, and Omar Chasa Gavra Rabba Isay. Chasa Rabba is a very big person, and the reason we're allowed to get married is because in Isa, the Salik, if in fact Chasa came out of the water because he's a gadol, Kala Isla the Milsa, everyone would talk about it. However, we don't agree with him. Velohi, as we saw earlier, Loshna Gavar Rabba, Loshna Lav Gavar Rabba. We don't care who it is. The Avadim Lechatchila Lo. We always will be of the opinion that one is not allowed to remarry if the husband is lost in a body of water that has no borders. We'll stop right here and pick up tomorrow with the final daf of Maseches Yevamos. Wishing you all a beautiful night.